this week marks the 27th anniversary of the start of the Rwandan genocide, a systemic attack on the Tutsi people by Hutu militia that in just 3 months killed something in the region of 1 million people, thousands of them children. Journalist and author Linda Melvern has written a number of books on the Rwandan genocide. Her work details how the international community and the United Nations failed Rwanda when there were clear signs of looming slaughter. In her latest book, Intent to Deceive, she details the growing fake news narrative that denies a Tutsi genocide. Linda Melvern joins me now. And Linda Melvern, thank you so much for your time and the work that you have done in reporting and unpacking Rwanda is truly astonishing. I'm wondering what you're making of reports today with President Paul Kagame saying the report indicates that France really has to shoulder a lot of the blame for what happened. What do you make of that?
I think it's absolutely true, and it's been a long time in coming. You know, it's 27 years, and there's been an awful lot of work done by historians and journalists to show that the role of France was huge. I mean, the military, the French military, had the most intimate relationship with the Rwandan military. There was arms dealing, there were militia training. I mean, it's extraordinary still today that a European state was so heavily involved in a regime that planned the extermination of part of its population. There have been doubts cast over the years that France didn't know what was planned, but I think what the Duclerc Commission released last week in Paris shows that this is false, that there was an awful lot of information in France leading to the conclusion that a genocide was planned and then a genocide underway.
In your book, A People Betrayed, you explain that there was a UN presence in Rwanda just before the worst of the genocide began, and that they didn't act. The UN people on the ground were saying there is terrible slaughter coming. We don't want to leave. We're going to leave people exposed. But the UN pulled those people out and then proceeded to do nothing. Why didn't they act?
Well, you know, I was in New York in April '94 outside the Security Council. The Security Council of the UN had mandated a small mission for Rwanda, 2,500 troops under the command of a Canadian General, Romeo Dallaire. When you think about it, you know, there were 70,000 troops in former Yugoslavia. So the priority of the Security Council at that time was quite clear. More concerned for what was happening in Europe. The shame on all the members of the Council is that knowing that an average or 10,000 people a day were being murdered in Rwanda, to have decided to withdraw the majority of those peacekeepers. I argue, I think, in A People Betrayed, that it's one of the greatest scandals of the last century. It sent a green light to the Rwandan genocidaires that they could continue to put in place their murderous conspiracy with no reaction at all from the outside world. And this, I think, shames us all. The 1948 Genocide Convention was not intended to stop genocide in Europe. It was intended to stop genocide in the world. And the convention was simply ignored in 1994.
And then after the massacre, by November of 1994, you write that the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda was set up. By January the next year, there was a list of 400 suspects. To date, how many people are behind bars? And I ask that because we've just got news that Paul Rusesabagina, who was the man lauded as the hero in the Hotel Rwanda story, has actually just been arrested and charged with terrorism. So how many people have been brought to book? And how many false narratives are needing to be corrected?
Well, in the list that I have from the very early lists show over 1,000 core perpetrators, and I'm talking about people who trained, planned, financed, and particularly spread this racist Hutu power ideology that underpinned the genocide. The International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda convicted 61. And I think what the French Duclerc Commission has shown is that France facilitated the escape of the genocidaires worldwide, that they helped them through to the DRC, and then, of course, those who had the money were able to disappear into European capitals, into Africa. They're everywhere. I mean, there are several hundred said to be in London. And France, as we know, has become a safe haven. So the work to find justice for this, the genocide of the Tutsi, is not yet finished, I don't think.
And then your latest book, I think it came out last year, Intent to Deceive. There are people who want to deny that the genocide of the Tutsis actually happened. They kind of want to reframe it as, oh, there was a bit of a war, people were not organized, they were acting in self-defense. Just talk to us about how problematic that movement is and how difficult it is to cut through and get to the truth in the midst of these very confusing stories that even big media outlets are taking on board in some cases.
It is, yes, I find that incredible. You know, all the stories that make up the denial narrative, i.e. the victims brought this upon themselves, there was a second genocide, all those claims were made in 1994 in the Security Council by the genocidaires themselves. You know, the interim government that was hastily established after the coup d'etat of Hutu power, the interim government that put into operation the extermination program, this government had a seat in the Security Council, one of the non-permanent seats. Not one government asked for this genocidal government to be removed, so it became a forum for denial while the crime was happening. It was in the council that the genocidaires used as a forum for propaganda, if you like. And all the stories that we hear now that are reported as, you know, investigative journalism or whatever, all those stories first appeared in the Security Council in 1994 as the genocidaires tried to disguise the true nature of what they were up to, which was to try to exterminate the Tutsi of Rwanda. And they determined to finish the job. They had to hide this crime from the outside world.
So 27 years on, you're explaining really that the propaganda in a way has not stopped. Could a Rwanda genocide happen again? I mean, certainly if we look in Rwanda or anywhere, and if you look globally, troubling signs of racism, minority groups being isolated, populist rhetoric on the rise, targeting vulnerable people. Do you think we could have another Rwandan genocide?
That's a terrible question. I mean, there is, as you said, there's already genocide in the world today, you know, with the Uyghurs. So, no, I don't think the lessons have been learned at all. I do think that if one properly studies what happened over Rwanda, there are some lessons there. I mean, for a start, I don't think the meetings in the Security Council should be held in secret. I think we should know what our governments are saying on our behalf. I mean, my government in 1994 in secret sessions called for the withdrawal of the peacekeepers. And that's deeply shaming. So I think that all of this really needs to be out in the open, and perhaps governments held to account for their failure to abide by the 1948 Genocide Convention, as my own country did. I think it's very important that the politicians and the officials involved at that time are held to account. Yes, I do.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me this evening. Absolutely fascinating insights there. Author of a number of books on the Rwandan genocide, Linda Melvern there.